Hey guys, what's up? So today I want to go over verse 1 in chapter 22 of Genesis and point out a contradiction I thought was interesting. So I'm going to read the verse and it says, "And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am." What I looked at in this verse was, why would God want to tempt anyone to do anything? To me, that doesn't make much sense. To me, that sounds a little devilish, a little demonic. And I felt like that was a misinterpretation of the word tempt. So I looked back to see what the word tempt meant in the original Masoretic text where the King James Version Bible derived from, right? Because it was originally written in Hebrew, then it was translated, I believe, in Latin, which was then created English and whatever. Now we have a horrible game of telephone, right? So I was like, there's no way God would want to tempt anybody, let alone Abraham. So what does this word tempt actually mean? So when I went back to the verse, I looked at what that meant, and the original word was Nissah. And Nissah in Hebrew means to test, to prove, or to refine. It does not mean to seduce in a demonic way, to trick you to do something, because again, that sounds very satanic, right? And God is the antithesis of satanic, if we are to look at it from that literal lens. So if we look at that and kind of reword it and say, God did ask Abraham to test or to prove or to refine within himself, and God said, Behold, here I am. When you look at that, right? When God is asking you to refine a process within yourself, to test a process within yourself, to prove a process within yourself, what is the one thing God would want you to do, right? It's not to prove anything to him. He's created everything in front of you. I think he's good. I don't think he needs any kind of physical satiation, right? What he's asking you is to prove to yourself that you are the creator, and this is my point of view. When he follows up and says, Behold, here I am, this mirrors the concept of Moses asking God what his name is, and God says, I am that I am. When you say, Behold, here I am, it means you're embodying a state of consciousness. It implies I am right there. And in this verse, here and am are italicized, which means at a later point where the Bible was translated, these words were added in to make literal sense of Scripture. But Scripture is not to be made of literal sense. It's to be meditated on from a mystic lens to give you enlightenment, right? So this verse should actually end, and he said, Behold, I. This is God saying to Abraham, and behold, I. So he's asking Abraham to test and to prove and to refine himself. And then God says, Behold, I. God isn't saying I'm in front of you. That sounds kind of silly. Why would God say, hey, I'm in front of you? I think if God was literally made manifest in front of you, you wouldn't need him to say, here I am. I think you'd know. I think you'd pick up on the context clues that something beautiful is happening, right? So the reason why God is saying, and behold, I, after he asks Abraham to test and to prove and to refine himself, is because when you understand you're the creator, this chapter is about sacrificing your attachment to the physical plane. He has to sacrifice Isaac on Mount Moriah, which translates to the concept of the place of teaching, right? Or God sees. So when you have to sacrifice that thing that you were barren for such a long time, right? Abraham could not conceive a child, his promise, up until a particular point in Scripture where he finally was able to conceive. That mirrors the concept of you finally believing in yourself and your manifestation potential. In this chapter, God is asking you to let go of that thing in which you had so much attachment to, that thing that was so hard to create. And the reason why he asks you to do that is because that is the ultimate sign that you are a master manifestor. When you really think of it, when you do not have attachment to the outcome and you just behold I, what does that mean? But to behold I break it down with me here. Behold I. You are being present tense, right? Because when you're saying I am something, that is you presently being something, right? And I is not plural. I is singular. So here if it was to be plural, you would say we or us. Behold we, behold us. But that's not the case. God says, behold I. So when you say that, it is present tense, right? Singular I. But if you narrow that down, it says present tense single I. When you're in present tense, you activate your single I. right? And prior to that, God is saying to test and to prove and to refine your inner nature, which is being a God on earth, understanding your conscious potential of being able to create that what it is you want so badly. And when you refine that process, when you know who you are, you will then behold I, because now you're tapping into your third eye. Right? So this whole chapter is not about human sacrifice. It is not about God tempting you to kill your son to prove a point. That sounds satanic. That sounds crazy. What this is all for is allegory for you to ponder on your inner capacity to create on this earth. When you recognize that your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, and your judgments create your reality day in and day out, that is you showing up and refining and proving to yourself and refining and testing yourself. When you behold I, when you are being conscious and you understand, right, my visualizations create my reality. I have to keep showing up every single day and visualize myself in the wish fulfilled, like Neville Goddard would say, right? And when you do that, you keep proving to yourself, you keep proving to the God within that your single eye is the Father, that you and the Father are one and cannot be separated.